So first of all, thank you for coming. I'm going to be talking a bit about React Native and how you should probably use it. So let me see. So what is React Native? This is what Facebook will tell you. It's a framework that will wholly replace mobile development as we know it today. Lofty, but it is what they're saying. Absolutely literally. And we got to understand that this is a very impactful point in and of itself. But it does have a lot of truth to it. In layman's terms, it's a JavaScript framework for cross-platform mobile development, using only JavaScript and targeting both iOS and Android. Windows Phone isn't supported, but for some random reason, Microsoft thought that it would be best to support Windows 10 and Xbox One as a possible React Native deployment platform. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I think the best way to actually go anywhere with this is actually just jump straight into the best features. Those best features are, it's actually almost fully multi-platform. 90% of the code is shared, and the only code that isn't shared is basically platform and view-specific code. It offers a faster iteration cycle and a somewhat more increased development speed than native, and we'll be getting across to every one of these points in a little while. It can be dropped in already existing native apps that don't use React or React Native at all. And one of the best features, and this one is available, but once again, we'll be getting there. You can write once and run anywhere in JavaScript without using any other language if you like, or if you can, it depends. But still, in general, you can use just JavaScript. However, we've all heard similar claims before, and I'm not gonna point fingers, but I'm gonna just show a couple of images. And to make the full joke, these are Cordova, Xamarin, and Ionic, which is basically Cordova with AngularJS and some hardware acceleration, but it's still more or less the same thing. So I'm going to take a victim out of all of these, and I'm going to use a couple of evaluation criterion to define how they do business, so to speak. The first criteria is how is your code written or represented. The second one is how is your code ran and by what. And at the end, what is a user, who renders what the user receives, and how do you answer to user events and all of that. So I'm gonna pick up PhoneGap or Apache Cordova, which is its actual name nowadays, and let's try to go through each of these points. The first one is you write code in JavaScript. All your code is actually just JavaScript, and if you need anything from a native module, there is a bridge that you can use and you can develop for the platform and have modules that can communicate with JavaScript and vice versa via a bridge, which is basically just a software pattern that allows you to translate code calls from one end to the other, to native land and JavaScript land. The second one is your JavaScript code is actually interpreted by the device's virtual machine, be it in Android, it's their own JavaScript machine, and on iOS, it's JavaScript core. And at the end, your views are just written in HTML, and everything is actually rendered by the device's web view. The web view that the device has, which in some cases is modular, but in some cases not. For example, lower versions of Android cannot switch out the default web view for the Chrome web view, which is something you could do nowadays, but still. Does this result in an actually native look and feel app? Sometimes, it's mostly no. Chances are every one of you has already been frustrated for example, it's not the best example, but Facebook for Android was a travesty when it was released using a HTML5 only avenue, and then they actually did some things around it. They noticed by doing some market research that people were getting frustrated that native experiences demand native performance, and native performance demands, well, until now, it demanded native. But how about React Native? How does it fare with the same sort of comparison? So React Native, you write code in JavaScript and communicate with native modules through a bridge. The same concepts apply. There is a bridge. There is the definition of userland in native and in JavaScript, and you can use the bridge to bridge them over if you will pardon my expression. What happens to your JavaScript code? It is interpreted by a vendor JavaScript core compiled version. Facebook actually does this. They forked JavaScript core and made it run on Android, and now you're using the same virtual machine with the same quirks on both platforms. And at the end, and this is where React Native really distinguishes itself from the pack, your views are written in React, your code is also written in React, but there's a lot of JavaScript involved, and they are rendered natively. How is this done? I'm gonna skim through it a bit, but basically, each time that you define a view, the bridge understands that, oh, the user wants to draw a view. Okay, then I'll get an UI view with what if you want 20 by 40? Okay, 20 by 40, and it draws them on screen. The native code still holds the UI cycle, and the UI kit on iOS does what UI kit does, but using React Native and using all the key bindings that React Native offers, you can basically just lay out your code in JavaScript, and then it'll get it consumed at runtime and not compiled, but interpreted to native views at runtime itself, which means that you're getting much faster performance than you could with any other system. But I can't be yapping all about React Native and ignore half of its name. What is React? This talk doesn't exactly concern itself with React per se, but there's a couple of points that we need to go through. One of them is that React is also marketed as a JavaScript library for building user interfaces, and that's it. They don't, unlike, for example, other competitors' projects like AngularJS, React Native is unopinionated about most things. You can drop it in as a view layer and use it just as a view layer. However, in here you have to be a little more smart about it, because you can't build an application with just a view layer. You have to have production and domain-specific code running to get your application doing supposed to do. But also, I forgot about that. I had a linked term definition. It's an opinionated, declarative way to describe UI and UI state. Now, what does this mean? It means a lot of things, but for me, one of the biggest things about React is you have compartmentalization. You can, I'm just gonna pop out here an example. This could be any website anywhere. You have a content class, then you have profiles, then you have a span class for the content title, etc. And you probably have CSS files all for those classes and anything like that. What React offers you is a way that you can define your components as, for example, this. This information, this div clearly indicates a profile with this name, this title, and this avatar. And this, for example, the big div over here is more concerned about content and content presentation. So we're going to extract this to two different components. One component for the container view, so to speak, that receives information through this title over here. And the profile also has exactly the same information, but it's more containable in this way. So what these are React components. These are things that you define yourself, well, basically they render in a certain way. For example, we made the content components render more or less what we had over here. So basically, it's a div that can accept anything in it and has a title that it renders after and before a couple of things. Oops, sorry, wrong button. And components receive information via props. This is basically HTML, but customized to hell and back. And the same way that HTML or DOM elements receive data through, well, a very similar mechanism, we're doing the same thing in React Native and React in general. One of the best things about having compartmentalization and being able to put things in buckets is that you can extract them and make a lot of nifty things with them. Imagine if you want a list that has every profile that you can have. You just put a scrollable list, you put in it, this is just straight JavaScript, which is something that the React team really wanted to do, unlike, for example, Angular, that we invented a lot of constructs, while in React you just use JavaScript, because once again, React is very much an opinionated. You just put a profile array, map through it, and get just render for each profile on this array, render a profile component with the data that the profile has. For example, this might be an object with an ID, a title, and a name. But React isn't just about extracting elements into modules. It's a lot more than that, and we don't have enough time for all of it. But I'll go through a couple of things that React component must be. It must be reusable, it must be modular, and it must be scoped. What does this mean? Reusable as in you should, after you extract a concept or a concept of your application into a component, you are way more likely to reuse it somewhere else. And if you build your components for reusability and composability, which is what makes it modular, you might be able to, from just a few components, by composing them together in predictable and very controllable ways, you can create a lot of features from just a couple of building blocks, which is pretty great to me, at the very least. It also means that there is a lot of scope into it. For example, one of the things that most people in web development hate is that CSS doesn't work as well as it should. In React, for example, you can just use, you can just have your CSS affect only your component, and it doesn't leak out, which, well, it saves you a lot of bugs, at the very least. Right. There's also a thing about the React components. Seeing as they are very easy to extract and make modular, maybe they're just not just useful just to you. Maybe you can make it useful for someone else. And there's a lot of communities, for example, Coach.js and now I'm getting a blank and I can only remember that one, I'm sorry. But there's a lot of open source communities that basically trade in thousands of reusable components for everyone to use, which is nice because there's a lot of people that I know that are using also React in their applications, and they're using tons of off-the-shelf components that do exactly what they wanted, which is an experience that most people didn't really have until now. Polymer had a little bit of it, and web component, the whole web component scene in general, but React really came through and elevated all of that to a really good level. But enough of that. What about the native? How does React Native work? So what I wanted to do is go over to the snake oil that I told you just a little while ago and go point by point and try to explain why it is that good. I'll start with the first one, which is the multi-platform thing. What do I mean about this 80–90% numbers and the number that is being corroborated by a lot of people. So it's not, if anything, it's not just me lying to you. It's me plus a couple of thousand guys, which probably makes it a conspiracy at some level, if you want to believe in that. But the thing is, most of your JavaScript code just simply works on both platforms because it's just JavaScript and it's being executed by the same actual virtual machine, even though they're compiled for 2 different platforms. But yeah, it should work. You'll just have to roll out a couple of codes for platform-specific UI stuff. For example, the thing that I'm most concerned about lately is that tabs on iOS should display the bottom and Android should display the top. That doesn't mean I shouldn't have a tab component or that I should have 2 different components, 2 separate components, one for one platform and the other for the other. Because one of the things that, yeah, I need to click twice. Great. Metro Bundler, which is what React Native uses. It's basically a webpack for native. It allows you to define components, and instead of naming the file, for example, component.js, you can name it component.ios.js, and a second file called component.android.js, and at compile time, probably compile time, yes, at compile time, the Metro Bundler and React Native in general will understand which component they should be importing stuff from, which is neat and nifty and allows you to have a very clean interface. And that's it about multi-platform. Let's go with faster iteration and development speed. One of the things that what the Metro Bundler does that stole a lot from what both Babel and Webpack are doing is hot reload and live reload. The hot reload on React Native is nothing short of magical, mostly because since everything is components, all you have to do is just, okay, I have rendered this component with this information, but the user saved the new version of the component, so just pull it out, pull in the new version, add in the new data, and bam, your application is suddenly it's different, it's new, it works. Even with stateful components, more often than not, the tool usually keeps the state in, so you can just basically type away and things will happen. Another thing that they also do is, since your application, which is something that I can go completely in detail, but your application, you have a ton of JavaScript files, you can structure them however you want, all of them get fed to the Metro bundler that I spoke about before, and you get a JavaScript file, a single JavaScript file, minified and with everything that you might need for your application, and that's your app. It's basically just that. You give that to the React Native framework, and your app will live. So, since your whole app is just one file, changing it over the air shouldn't be exactly hard. You just beam the file when it's ready, or actually just set up your native side to, while booting up, check against the server and see if there's a new version of the file, and if there is, you can just push it. Pull it, sorry. There's no App Store or confirmation process, none of the sort, and Apple, strangely enough, is okay with this. They've said that explicitly. They're just a little bit scared if people edit Objective-C and native code in general on the fly. But if it's just JavaScript and it's being fed to something that they have ownership of, which is the JavaScript core machine, it's fine. Which is pretty good for example, when you have a critical bug and you have to fix it, like right now. So you can do it. So about the dropped-in and existing native apps part, React Native, if you wanted to, it can live as just a simple view that you can position on what your app already has. So if you have, for example, an app that has a lot of tabs and drawers and everything like that, and you just want to add a new feature just to try out if this is okay for you or not, you can just go to your project, add the new React Native view, feed it a file with the JavaScript that you want for your feature to work, and that's that. Ship it. You don't need, there's no crazy integrations or anything like that. It's actually pretty easy to integrate, which is one of the main things that is driving up adoption, and it works on both platforms. And second, yes, and if, for example, obviously, eventually you're gonna need to do something that you can't just do with plain JavaScript because there aren't APIs for it. Imagine you want to access the camera or access sensors or anything of the sort. You have to have a native module that can do everything that you want it to do and communicate those results back through the bridge to the JavaScript program. And that's actually pretty easy to do. If there's anything that you need that you can't do with JavaScript, just build a native module. If there's anything you need that's more performant, that needs more performance or has more performance needs than what you can do in JavaScript, just do it in native and integrate it. So it works. And as the final best feature, it uses JavaScript, which is, for better or for worse, one of the world's most popular and leading languages in the world, with thousands and thousands and thousands of packages. And if you want not to write the code for left padding something, just pull it out from NPM. What's the worst that could happen? And second best feature, JavaScript has a lot of issues, true, but there's extensive tooling to make sure that everything is better. For example, Flow, TypeScript, Webpack, NPM, and others that I didn't think about right there, so I can remember right now. But nonetheless, there isn't a thing as a rose without thorns. So I'm going to go through a couple of bad things from React Native and how they can be mitigated or not. So the first one is obvious. JavaScript is a language where things like these actually happen, even though nowadays, and I've actually only noticed this for this talk, if you put that into a console, it'll spell out false. They are both true, but if you evaluate them separately, one evaluates to object-object, and the other one evaluates to 0. unless you put it in a variable in which it goes to object-object again. So yeah, JavaScript is fun. There's a lot of things to it. And going back to my point of before, tool complexity is not ideal. Even though there's a lot of tooling involved to make JavaScript really, really great as a language, those things can also fail. For example, if you have a bug in your program, maybe it's a plugin on Webpack that's doing it? Probably. Considering now you have thousands and thousands and thousands of things that, that process your code until it gets to the release platform, who knows? More. It's driven by Facebook needs, and that means that sometimes you're going to need something that isn't available, and Facebook isn't there to support you in any way because that's not their use case. They are actually doing a lot of good work in terms of open source and in terms of React Native. What they're doing and what the engineering that they're pulling into the thing is pretty great for everyone in the open source community. But for example, the routing that ships with React Native is subpar in many ways. But thanks to the glorious power of open source, both, for example, Airbnb, Wix, and React Native React community that came out of not having everything and needing to be organized in order to build stuff that actually everyone wants, have their own implementations, each of them with their own quirks and with their own use cases. For example, Airbnb needed a navigator, which, by the way, I totally forgot about explaining what a navigator is or a router is. A router is something, it's a component in React that, given a route, renders other components. So it's basically something, a single component that you can feed in your URL, and it will fetch the pages or the components to make that URL, show what you want. For example, Airbnb needed a navigator that could seamlessly go navigate through native pages to JavaScript pages. And that meant, for example, having the header stay the same, or not having an animation from a header to a shadow header that was created in JavaScript. So they did it. Wix, for example, needed a navigation system that was a whole lot more performant than what React Native has. And the React community was basically the same thing, but in pure JavaScript. Just basically going through pure JavaScript as Facebook did it, but better, so it's a whole lot more performant. More worse features. Yes, upgrading React Native is a bit of a mess sometimes, especially if you're stuck on a pre-0.40 version. There were a lot of breaking changes, and Facebook did always have a very move fast, break things mentality, and sometimes that's painful for the end developer. We're gonna have to we're gonna have to give them a break on that regard, because the latest versions actually have a way more stable upgrade path than before. So they've learned from it. Another couple of features that are decent to talk about. It's not the same thing as native. It's very close to native, but obviously there's going to be a lot of proxying involved, and there's a bridge that people need to cross, and crossing bridges takes time. And all that overhead might be a little bad for you, for example, if you need a very, very, very robust, always 60 FPS, which you can do, but it takes a little bit of technical acumen in order to do so. More worst features. The if you licensing. I'm not going to go a whole lot in detail about this one, but basically Facebook has a couple of patents on how React works. And so some legal departments might be a little bit concerned about that. Honestly, it's not something very troubling. It's basically, if you don't sue Facebook, you're not going to have any issues at all. But you know lawyers. There's another small thing, which is a very long dependency chain. This is something that I don't feel is a problem, but many people do. It's a JavaScript project, and JavaScript is always built on the shoulders of other modules, and the modules that came before them, and the modules that came before them, and the modules that came before them, and that's why you can have node modules in Windows. It's complicated, but it is what it is in JavaScript land. And I think, yes, I wanted to do a little bit of live coding. Hopefully it'll be, how do I say it, visible enough. Let me see if I can just push this over. No, I can't because this isn't full screen. Yeah, we're gonna have to let you off for a second here. And let me open up exactly Visual Studio Code. And this is on the wrong, yes, I don't want to see the slides right now. So I'm gonna go and open the app, the index files. So your app always starts from one of these, the index.ios or the index.android.js files. Can everyone see right? I can increase the font if anyone needs. Let me just remember, how do I do this? I need to go settings, font size, and let's make it a 14. And of course, this needs, yeah, 16. Yeah, it's over here. I'm not too good with computer. Okay, this should probably work. So there's just a couple of things on this file, which is the maybe.
I think you can increase the resolution a little bit.
I tried to, but it failed miserably. Yeah, there's no setting for this is for the retina display, yes, but here I don't have any settings. HDMI, it's a beauty, isn't it? Okay, so back to the code. We're importing the application, which is its own component, from app.js, and we're registering that component with the app registry with the free play app, which is the app that I created. First of all, I need the terminal to show on that side. I need to open an actual console. Term. Let's see that it doesn't spoil the rest of the code. Okay, let me go to talk and free play. Good. So I'm gonna start up the application right now. Yarn run iOS. Oops. So what it's doing, it's finding the Xcode project. It's compiling what the framework has by default, which is a React, in this case, an iOS app with just a Vue for React Native to work in. And of course, the simulator is nowhere to be found, because of course. Ah, there we go. Jesus Christ, that's huge. Let me see if I can make this a little bit smaller. And now it's unreadable. Nice. Hopefully, we won't have a lot of text to do. One of the things that I want to do first is open up the development menu, and I'm gonna. Oh, auto reloading is already in. Nice. So I can go back to app.js. If I click here, it won't work. Wow, it did. Nice. So I can go over here and say goodbye, because this is going away. See ya. There's I had a little bit of an idea to implement here. I'm gonna go. Have you ever seen those games at public fairs and everything else with the hammer and the strength games in which you hammer something that goes up? I'm terrible at explaining these sorts of things, so sorry. But why don't we do something like it for React Native? So the first thing that we want to do is create a view. I'm going to create a view over here. View style equals. Remember that thing that I said about CSS not existing anymore? Or in some degree. In React Native, there is no CSS. You do your layout with the CSS-like. That isn't CSS. It's just JavaScript objects, which is amazing because right out of the box, you can combine two JavaScript objects. And do more complicated stuff with them. For example, just filtering out the whole spreadsheet, or basically CSS is code now. And since it's code, you can do stuff with it. It's not inflexible anymore. So, however, it's still sort of CSS because you're probably gonna be able to see what this is doing. The background color is red. Width is gonna be 100, actually 200, actually 100. Height another 100. Hopefully I'm still writing. And I don't have word wrap, so this is gonna be a fun experience. Yes, I wrote it. And it failed because I'm just gonna enable word wrap. And it didn't do much, but okay. Yeah, I see what is wrong here. And close out the tag. And now we've got a box in it. Good. I've managed to create a box in the middle of my phone, and this box is platform independent. We're going places. But the thing is, I can't do anything with this box out of the box, pardon my expression. One thing about this view is this is the bare bones view that React Native offers. It's actually a UI view in the background, and I can actually see it through the inspector. Yeah, it says RCT view, but it's a subclass of UI view. This is an actual native view that we are having on our screen over here. So let me hide the inspector again. But yeah, it's just a view. It doesn't do anything. Like any other good UI view, it doesn't do what people didn't tell it to do. I already have an import over here that will allow me to do more stuff with it, which is the interactable module, which was created by Wix. They're actually doing a lot of things in interactable in React Native. I'm going to put this view inside another view, because remember, components are reusable and modular. And I'm going to finish this here. I'm terrible at this. Yes, it's the other one.
I think so.
Yeah.
Slash name of the,
Ah, crap.
Okay.
Thank you for all the assistance. This couldn't have been done without you. And now, oh look! We're having something over here. And now it's gone and will never come back again because there's no boundaries. So I'm gonna reload and it's back here. Nice. I'm gonna get rid of it again because I don't want it right now. So we need boundaries. So the first thing that we're gonna do is add boundaries to our view over here. Remember that React Native and React React components in general receive components via props. So there's a prop counts boundaries. And if I remember correctly, this is like something like x top 20, 200, bottom minus 1000, left 200, right 200. And hopefully it'll have worked.
It will have minus 200.
Yeah, exactly.
And both positive, one left and right.
Both positive?
Yeah, one of them has to be negative. I understood this correctly. Maybe not that.
Maybe not that one, yes. Ah, it worked. It worked. And yeah, I need to.
Probably switch the
Top needs to be
bottom,
negative, if I remember. Oops.
and the bottom.
No, it was the bottom. My mouse selection is acting a little bit weird. Good. And now we have boundaries over here, so we can probably do a whole lot more with this. I'm gonna add a couple of more things. First of all, I'm gonna make it that it can't move horizontally. So if I remember, it's vertical only equal true. Now we can only move it like this. Good. Let's do something a little bit better. Let's add gravity to it. Gravity points equals, and now I have to seal this off somewhere else, because otherwise we're gonna pass a long time trying to debug something stupid. So gravity points is this thing over here. Oop. And now we can see that even if I pull it up, it always falls back down again. So we almost have something neat over here. I'm gonna go ahead, and probably most of you already noticed that I have a gyro observable variable over here that I'm gonna which comes from a React Native Sensors kit that basically gives me access to the gyroscope. So let's connect to the gyroscope on the iOS simulator and see what happens. So going back here, I'm gonna need to do stuff on to make the gyro observable work. So I'm gonna just use the constructor on this component. All components have life cycles, so they're constructed. Then there's a couple of life cycle functions that you can hook onto to make sure that the component does what it's supposed to do. Oh, sorry? Yes. So I'm gonna go ahead and say gyro observable dot map. This receives an object with x, y, and z coordinates. I'm just going to go ahead and copy paste the whole code again because I'm getting nervous that this won't work.
You mean outside.
Didn't even see it, sorry. Zoop. And yes, I can do stuff without using super. And now we've got, what I've done down here is basically I get the x, y, and z values. I multiply them by 100 because it's, by 1,000 because it's fun. And then for every subscription that we have on this observable, I'm gonna, I just need to do this first, which is ref equals ball. And basically every time that I do something with my phone, the ball will raise in velocity and go up. So we've got our strongman game half done. I thought I had my backpack over here, but strangely I don't. Where is it? So what I'm going to do now is prove that this multi-platform stuff works by connecting my Android phone right away, and the application should work. If not, I'll be spending a lot of time, a long time on the away zone, never to be seen again. So first thing that I need to do is, and the only thing that I need to do is go over here, yarn, run Android. Actually, just let me see if this works. Yes. Yarn, run Android. It uses Gradle behind the scenes. There's a lot of please pay no attention to the man behind the curtain going on React Native. A lot of concepts are abstracted away. But in general, it works, and most of those concepts needed to be gone anyway. Ooh, 22 seconds, a new record. And you can even be faster, imagine that. Okay, so it's loading. And we've got our thing right here. And since I'm showing it around, it should be jumping around every time because I guess the sensors are working. I'm gonna do a little, I have an oops file, which is what I've been stealing stuff from. That does something a little bit different. Command A, Command V. Yes, of course. And what I've got here is basically the strongman game, but with a small text label at the top.
Sorry, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Is that easy to do that with the iPhone?
What exactly?
You do it with Android, we install an application on Android. Is that easy with the iPhone?
As easy as Xcode will allow it to be. So it's not harder than your regular application. That's what I'm saying. When I ran a yarn run iOS, it booted up the simulator because it couldn't find any active devices. And me, being the poor man that I have a broken Android to test things with, which is always nice. Let's go through the changes. So I've done a couple of things. I've set a velocity that I actually don't use now that I think about it. I set a state to tell when the ball is at the biggest y coordinate. I do the same thing about the velocity, and one extra function that I have, which is a callback to the onDrag prop, which means this function always gets called every time that the view moves. I check if it's basically checking if it's the max value that y already had or not, and then I set it in state. Now I use this set state is basically the way that you should update React components. Every component has two things. They have props and they have their internal state. And basically you only need to render the component again when your data changes, aka when your props change, or which basically comes from your parent controller doing your parent's component doing something with you. For example, the user just selected another button. Now you need a list of something else instead of the list that you already have. So the list component got the new prop with new content, so it has to re-update that. Or the internal state, which is something that you can do internally, and with every state that you set, a new render occurs. So I just have a couple of small things here that are going on. I got this other function, and I've got this text component right here that basically takes what's in the state and draws it to the screen, which is what is rendering our little text over here. One thing that I totally forgot is that this thing is still totally clickable. I could probably disable that, and I probably could do some math up round over here, but for testing purposes, it looks good enough. And now the screen that I use over here in Android and real devices is toggled with this motion. So I'm going to just do a reload. And yeah, instantly, oops, the application sort of works. It doesn't work as well because doing this triggers the React Native dev screen. But yes, in a couple of minutes, and honestly, it took me about 2 hours to go over the exercise. You have your first React Native app that actually does something instead of just being a box. So let's go back, if we can, to the actual presentation, and I assure you I'm not going to take long. There's some talk about the everyone is still a little bit mad that Google killed Google Reader, so I have to talk about this on the future for every other projects. There is a chance, of course, Facebook can just run away and stop developing and contributing to React Native. But they're using it intensively. As some may know, the Facebook Ads Manager is completely built out of React Native, and I'd say that's a pretty high-profile application in and out of itself. A lot of components in Instagram and Facebook are also using React Native, if I recall correctly. And well, they're not going to abandon something that they've been using for so long and even not proving it internally at the company. So that's some sort of not very good concern. Most code is also open source, if not all of it. Even if Facebook's abandoned it, other teams and other companies can basically sponsor it for bringing it up their life. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of apps that they're released using React Native, and there's a very intensive ecosystem going around and being created. And Jesus Christ, even Microsoft has a React Native front end that renders to both the modern apps and Xbox One apps, which I think are the same thing now that I think about it. So yeah, it's probably here to stay, and all the fear, and it's probably not something that you should pay a lot of attention to. There's a couple of end notes. For example, I didn't totally touch on how testing is done. There are a lot of ways to make tests on React Native. There's a test runner called Jest that Facebook uses and asks for people to use as well, which is increasingly good. 2 years ago, it wasn't as great, and nowadays it's actually fast. Facebook put a lot of development time into making sure that the thing was easy and friendly to use. But yeah, it basically goes through all of your components, it renders them in text, and that is used as a snapshot. There are other suites and other ways that you can test components off, but this is the one we're using internally. They basically take the components, they render them to basically text, and they use that as a comparison in order to as your application continue and grows in complexity. You can always use those snapshots to make sure that things are working as expected. They are your expected test case. However, since it is a native application to some degree, you can just use Xcode's tests or Android testing in and out of itself. You have to be a little bit precise. For example, you have to name your views in order for the accessibility engine, which most test runners or test runners real devices use to hook into those views, but it's still perfectly possible and perfectly maintainable. In other notes, the tooling is pretty good. For example, I created this small application using a small tool called Create React Native App, which basically sets up the skeleton for a React Native application if you want to, and it allows you to, for example, use a project called Expo, which is basically it's React Native as it is, plus a bunch of native modules that you might need, like Cordova did it. And instead of having to wrestle between the JavaScript core of your application and then the two compiled versions that you, two compiled frameworks, so to speak, which is the React Native framework plus all the native modules that you like. They have a default pack that you can use, which is Expo, or you can use basically everything you want. You can have full control or no control at all to make it simpler or easier for you. There's also a lot of tooling involved. There's first-party flow support. There's the Metro Builder is totally completely developed in-house and for their users, and grows in complexity and speed at every passing day. There are a lot of nice things about React Native on the tooling side, so I suggest you take a look. It's also fully compatible with continuous integration and permanent deployment, especially if you script things out. We have Nextcode plus Jest plus Fastlane testing pipeline that tests and releases to test flight users if you need to. It's pretty nice, and you should take a look at it. But at the end, should you use React Native and React? It sort of depends. It's better if you have, for example, a requirement that your application has to be fully available on all platforms, and you don't want to maintain two separate code bases. It's helpful, for example, if you have a lot of web developers that never quite took the plunge to mobile, but with this they can. It's not that hard. It's mostly the same code they've been writing all this time, but now it comes inside of a small package. And well, it's basically just that. For example, I'm loving developing on it. I remember I've done some work for mobile and Android and iOS, and I hated, for example, doing layouts because it's a thing that you either get it right the first time or you have to wait like 5 minutes to rebuild and make sure that your changes were actually correct. And right now with hot reload, with all the niceties the tooling gives me and the possibility to push to multiple people or even to select people if I want them to, having that kind of power is nice. the development is nice, and the end result is basically indistinguishable if you know what you're doing from an actual native app. So I recommend you try it. As you can see, it's simple just to use for a couple of small features on your already existing code base. So take the plunge, and maybe you'll be happier doing it that way. And that's all. Thank you.
When you talked about alternatives, you didn't mention native script. What is your take on native script?
I've never used it, so I didn't feel well giving it a good answer.
Okay.
That was actually part of a question that I've been having in my head. There are lots of languages, lots of versions, lots of libraries. How does hopefully, or one that wants to become a better and better developer keeps all that in check in his head, because he needs to learn probably hundreds of details of each. How does one uses that effectively and knows where to look when he needs to solve a problem, and find the right tool to solve that problem that can happen only once, and you still have to know that you have to use this if you want to have a. How do you deal with that usually?
Usually, I've never used many of these. I was previously a mobile developer working with especially Android, and I basically said I'll never use PhoneGap, I'll never use Cordova, just give me native. I know it hurts, but it works. And as such, I've never really given any of my time to any of those frameworks. So I'm not in a very good position to answer in that regard. However, what I can say that the biggest thing for me about React Native is really the iteration speed and how easy it is to check if what you thought was good code was actually good code and it does what you want. But yeah, I'm guessing there's one thing that is also nice in terms of React Native. If you have a little bit of native experience, chances are you're going to know what's happening when, for example, your builds start failing, because you've already used Gradle before and you know what's going to happen there. But apart from that, I really can't answer very well. Sorry. Yes?
You mentioned the overhead in terms of speed. What about in terms of the size of the package? For instance, that game that you did, what is, for instance, the size?
Let me check.
APK.
Let me check so I don't apply to you accidentally.
Because some native, like Qt, they are very,
Yes.
they are pretty big. The builds.
Let's see, applications and notifications, installed. Just let me sift through the garbage. So there's a very small application. Is 7 megabytes and a half, more or less.
It's good.
Not bad, not bad. It's plus it's running on development mode, and it probably could be minified a whole lot better.
But even if you develop, you extended the overhead, it shouldn't increase as much.
Not as
from
much.
From now, because 7 megas are what you
Exactly.
what you use, and then you only write on top of it.
Exactly. What the small framework that's used for rendering React Native apps, it's basically what consists of. It's basically 99% of the application, because the rest, the 1% that's left, is your simple JavaScript file, and that'll never get too big. What can get big, however, is the custom native modules.
Of course.
There's no way around that. Please.
I have a question. It sounds very powerful, right? So you have just one framework, and then you write it for 2 platforms. But do you know any restriction where it stops and where you have to go back after developing in React Native, and then like, damn, I have to go back to Android and tweak something there, or did you come across something like that?
I haven't, and I don't think I will, because of the native module options. If I really needed to do something in native that I couldn't do for example, fast enough in React in JavaScript. For example, number crunching is one of the most offloaded to native things. Yeah, I can just write up a custom module, send it on my JavaScript side, send it my data, and just wait for it to asynchronously get back to me, and I can use that.
So this means you have to know React Native, and then if something appears like that, so you have to go back to the Android and then
Write Java or write
exactly,
Swift
so you
or
need
Objective-C, yes. But that's very rare. For most applications, unless you need something that that's only available through a device API, for example, yeah. But chances are, for example, both the views and the sensors package was something that's already done on the internet, and it was basically just yarn add, get the package, and it works. So there's the possibility to do it yourself, and if for some reason one is feeling lazy, just get it from the internet. Maybe it'll work.
Facebook has Facebook Messenger and also Facebook Lite, right?
Mhm.
You know,
Yes.
at least in Android there is like Facebook Lite also from Facebook. Do you know if both of them use React Native or only one?
I can't say. Probably not, because the Lite version is marketed for phones that would have similar specs to the phones that we had in like 2009. And chances are they cut off that, but I'm not the most qualified person to talk about that.
I think additional questions can be asked. Dinner, you're staying, right?
Yes.
So, just a quick show of hands, who's not staying for dinner?
Ice cream,
You can
ice cream for ice cream.
Blue ice cream. Okay, so the people who are not staying, if you have any question or any comments before you're kicked out, feel free. Thank you all for coming. We are gonna wrap up here for today and then head out to dinner, to chat, etc., and then to delicious ice cream. Thank you.